Alright guys, here is the part 2 of our lactic acid videos. This is actually called The Truth Behind the Burn. So we're actually going to talk about why your muscles actually burn. Is it because of lactate or because of other molecules that are floating in your blood? And some of the benefits of lactic acid training. So we're going to start by talking about how the body's muscles and the body systems get their energy, and that's through a molecule called ATP. This molecule does not occur in nature, and your body doesn't store much of it. So basically, we get this ATP, we produce it from the food we eat, and other metabolic processes through the body that I'm going to not explain because they're long and laborious, and this video would be 20 minutes long if I explained them. But basically, our bodies in a steady state or in a very low activity state are using fat for its energy source for the most part, because our body is very efficient at that, and it takes a long time to use fat as fuel. So if we're doing low powered activities such as like going for a walk or getting up from our desk to get water at the water cooler, really easy for your body to use fat as its energy source. And fat is the highest yielding energy compound, so you get more ATP from fat than you do from carbohydrate or protein. Now, it doesn't mean go out and eat a bunch of fat. That's not what that means. But what that means is of the stored fat in your body, there are more ATP available from the stored fat than from any other compound or any other substrate. However, when you work out at an intense level, it takes a while for the fat in your body to meet the ATP demand. It takes a while because all of a sudden you're operating at a low level and you jump up to a high level. The fat metabolism doesn't speed up that quickly. So what your body uses is a process called anaerobic metabolism. And that's when the body's not synthesizing fat quick enough for ATP, so it switches to what's called the glycolytic energy pathway and the phosphagen pathway, but we're going to go ahead and skip that just for the purposes of this discussion and talk about the glycolytic energy pathway that's used to fuel the body. So basically using sugar and carbohydrate to fuel the body and synthesize ATP. Not as efficient, you don't get as much ATP out of it. However, it's faster than aerobic metabolism. So while the body's dipping into your mitochondria and starting to prepare the fat to synthesize ATP, it's your body's using carbohydrate as its fuel source. It's basically a temporary measure until your body can use aerobic metabolism. The byproduct of this is lactic acid. So this glycolytic energy system, pyruvate is a byproduct, and also lactate is a byproduct. And other byproducts of lactate production are most likely responsible for that burning sensation. So the lactate actually helps reduce that acidic feeling in your muscles, but there's a lot of protons, a lot of hydrogen ions that are floating around in your blood as a byproduct of lactate production. So, but lactate actually pulls a lot of those protons back into itself to create lactic acid, and that actually reduces the acidity level in your muscles. So actually, if you think the burn that's occurring in your muscles when you're working out is bad, it'd be worse without lactate. It's not because of lactate. Lactate's actually helping it be less, your muscles fatigue less than they would if there wasn't lactate there. If you're pushing your body at or near your lactate threshold, that's called lactate training, or lactic acid threshold training. So you're basically training your body to operate at the point at which your body's producing more lactate than it can get rid of. Okay, this actually isn't a bad thing. This is because lactate is not damaging to the muscles. You're not really doing your muscles any harm, and it's very beneficial in raising that lactate threshold above what your body has naturally. Okay. And basically, it's a ratio of your VO2 max. So VO2 max is, like we talked about, the maximum oxygen consumption that your body can take in a given moment. Okay, how much maximal oxygen can be taken in. And for normal people, average people, the lactate threshold occurs at about 50 to 60% of that. If you have someone that's very well trained, it could be up to like 95% of their VO2 max. So ideally, you want to get that lactate threshold as high as you possibly can, because that means you can go harder and faster for longer without having anaerobic metabolism kick in. Okay. It also improves your mitochondrial function. So lactic acid training, or lactate threshold training, improves the function of your mitochondria, which are primarily responsible for oxidative metabolism, so it's fat metabolism. It's mostly beneficial for endurance athletes. Sprinters aren't going to want to do this. A lot of weightlifters probably aren't really going to want to work on lactic acid threshold training, but those who are endurance athletes, it's going to be very beneficial for you, because it will allow you to work at a higher intensity for a longer period of time without having fatigue set in. Okay, and basically, when your VO2 max or your lactic acid production is increasing, your body might have switched over to aerobic metabolism. So when you start off, the first 5 to 10 seconds of exercise is phosphagen system. So there's a phosphocreatine is a compound that your body produces. It uses that to synthesize its initial ATP that it needs. Then it switches over to glycolytic. Then it switches over to aerobic. So aerobic is oxidative or fat metabolism. So once you're in fat metabolism, your lactic acid production will increase, but your body's also removing it and using it as fuel. Once you hit lactate threshold, the anaerobic metabolism kicks in, because you've basically exhausted your fat metabolism stores. So you're using all the ATP that your fat can actually give you. So at that point, you have to switch over to glycolytic or anaerobic means for lactic acid and lactate and ATP. So it's just kind of interesting to think about that if you have a marathon runner, they get into this oxidative state where they're using fat metabolism, and then once they cross that lactate threshold, now they're going back into the anaerobic means to supply their body's ATP needs. So your body's actually pretty efficient at getting the energy that it needs. It will switch metabolic pathways to get ATP in any way it needs to. Unless you just completely exhaust your ATP stores, and then you would completely crash and you wouldn't be able to exercise at all. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to implement lactate threshold training and what it means for you in the gym. So what do you actually have to do in the gym to raise that lactate threshold level. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you soon with part 3.